We were off at the IndyCar last week, weren't we?
What I put in there is new though. I mean, he put that up this week, so I put it in there.
Yeah, because the week before was when I had the button issue.
So I'm just going to read that sentence. A new track record at the Daytona Road Course by Brian Beard. So he posted that October 20, only 2 days ago.
So I was able to carve out about an hour, so I'm gonna have to bail right after the fantasy talk.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I thought you weren't going to make it at all.
I wasn't. I've had a heck of a week, and today was I yeah, destroyed my back today, but I did some therapy and I'm doing all right so far.
Rutro.
I do weird stuff to my back. Like I'll sneeze and my back goes out. Like I can sneeze and my back will go out. So Evan, we never got a confirmation he's seen the text or the DMs.
I'd shoot him another one, and then we'll just
I gave him a 30-minute reminder.
cool. All right, that would be another one.
I'll hit him up right at 3:40 at the 45 mark. And then Greg's bringing somebody.
Yep, but instead of it being like a guest where we do the whole interview process, I think he's just going to have him talk about that article, basically that race, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Is he
another
coming?
Canadian.
Is he coming at the top of the show?
I think we told him he'd be after Evan.
Right.
Did anybody in particular want that merchandise, that t-shirt merchandising topic?
I'll take it if no one else will, but however you want to do it.
I'll just put it in regular order if nobody's specific.
Yeah, just do it in normal order. If the guy shows before Evan, maybe we pre-record his.
Well, if he shows before Evan, we just do it before.
Right.
But when you go to Evan, instead of doing a transition and saying, "Okay, now we're going," instead of connecting it to what happened before, just do a little pause and just say, welcome to the show, Evan. Let's talk." You know what I'm saying? Try not to connect it to the previous topic. And even though in other places we do transition everything, let me use the music there to break it.
You want me to leave a pause for truncate silence so you can cut in?
Oh yeah, well yeah. Truncate silence will kick in. What happened last time is you literally just said you said bye to one guy and hi to the other guy in the same sentence, and there was just nowhere for me to cut in without it being really really awkward. So just let them be completely separate sections. Like don't connect it thought wise.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Just whenever he drops in, just start it cold.
Greg, when is your guy coming?
Says he's having problems with TeamSpeak. Just give me a minute.
Because if Evan doesn't show, we might go in a different order.
Okay. I gotta get into the drive. Shit.
So we got some constructive criticism this week. Are we gonna address that this show?
What, the not being organized?
Yeah.
Well,
No?
it is a casual setting.
And it also is it's only directed at two of us.
It didn't say specifically who.
Bullshit, Mike. You know who we were talking about.
Well, it didn't
it's me
say
and
that.
Tony.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with it. In fact, I think it's almost better because it's more spontaneous.
Oh yeah. No. Like I'm not even concerned about it. But I was gonna say, like, if we're not going to address it here, then I'm going to bring it up on the aftermath because I do have some words about it. And, good, bad, whatever. Feedback is always good. So,
Yeah, how about it?
yeah.
Can someone send me the drive link? Because everything's gone on my computer right now.
Okay. We need to start. We're over time. So there's Evan. So we'll go right into stuff here. Let me bring him in. And you guys go ahead and start hitting record.
If I see what's his name come in, I'll move channels and I'll go talk to him in a different channel.
Okay. And we're just going to bring him in where he's in the script.
Plan on it that way.
Okay.
He can,
Might as well.
yeah.
Hey, Evan, we're about ready to start whenever you're ready.
Yep, I'm good to go.
Okay, we're about ready to hit record here. Greg, you hit record, and then David. Welcome to the iRacers Lounge. I'm your host, Mike Ellis. iRacers Lounge is a podcast for the iRacer, where we talk all things iRacing in a casual setting. Joining me are the usual characters, Brian McCubbin,
Good evening, everyone.
David Hall,
Hello, hello.
Tony Groves,
What's up, fellas?
Greg Hectus,
Hey, everybody.
and special guest Evan Pasoko.
Happy to be here on time for once. Thanks for having me, guys, as usual.
You made the entry, all right, or the intro. All right, well, let's jump right into the Coke race. We're glad to have you. I mean, I think we started off the week going, wait, there's another race? It really threw me off because I'm so used to the 2-week rhythm, and now we're in this 1-week rhythm, and I was definitely thrown off a bit.
Yeah, we're feeling it because, there's a lot less time behind the scenes to go over the week before, but I'm sure the people feeling it are most of the drivers, right? Because we go from having 2 weeks of prep for every race to now just a single week of prep for playoff racing. So it's intense. It's nonstop. I'm not going to complain about it, but it is definitely kind of high pressure, high stakes. As you know, we're going to be done before we know it. As I kind of hate to see the end of the year fly by, but if you're looking for stuff to watch, it's good for you because back to back these last 4 weeks.
Yeah, and it's creeping up, that's for sure. But nonetheless, iRacing did get out a hype video, another good one, showing the faces of the 8 guys going for the 4 spots and whatnot. Pretty good video, get us kind of hyped up.
Yeah, trying to use some of that material we got earlier in the year, and I'm thinking as we go to Texas, it's probably going to be roughly the same thing, and then I know that. We're working on a lot of special stuff for Homestead, obviously, as well. Some of that stuff's going to be for the live broadcast, obviously, and then a little bit of it's going to be for the TV cut as well. So a lot of cool stuff coming up still.
All right, well, let's jump right into the race. It was Ottinger, Leahy on the front row for the start, and it was clean and green through the first part of this race. And then it was green flag stops. It was Mike Conti who strikes first. And he's out ahead of Nick Ottinger. And then Keegan Leahy still hadn't pitted in that first cycle.
Yeah, we weren't really sure. I mean, first off, this is like a tale of 2 Kansas races, right? The first 3 quarters and then the end. But, we thought that the undercut for Conti was going to work because he comes out because it was Leahy, Ottinger, and Conti all bumper to bumper, first, second, and third. And they really were the 3 fastest cars in the field. And so Conti goes for the undercut. He comes up ahead of Nick, but it was somewhat short-lived. I think Ottinger got him back at about 6 or 7 laps or so after the pit cycle. But we thought Leahy was misstepping here, and when I say we, I mean Steve thought so as well. So at least I can't beat myself up too much for thinking the call was wrong because Steve's got some crew chiefing experience, and he wasn't too sure about it either. But it did pay out for Keegan. He pitted, and in that pit cycle, he was 10 seconds back, a half a dozen spots behind those 2, and we're thinking, man, he's going to struggle through traffic. He didn't. So Keegan eventually cycled himself back up through, but just a little bit of, I mean, that's the race we thought it was going to be. At that point, when Leahy went back to the lead and when Ottinger had gotten back ahead of Conti, our first, second, and third were back to where they were before the pit stops. And at that point, we're thinking, all right, this race isn't going to have a yellow. It's going to come down to strategy on the second stop, and that's kind of the race that we thought we were in for.
Yeah, and it was exciting watching Leahy with the newer tires going around those guys. Had a great replay on NASCAR Twitter where they were 5 wide as he went clear to the bottom. And this track really allows that with the newer tires. You can just get right down on the apron and just go around everybody.
Yeah, 5, 6 wide at times, especially as you mentioned there in the pit cycle, where you had guys on fresh tires, and as we would see later in the race as well, unsuccessfully, I might add, drivers on restarts trying to get that width. That it was almost like they thought we were at Pocono with how wide they were getting.
Yeah, through this cycle, it was fun to watch the battle for second, though. Nick Ottinger, who's looking to advance into the title race, of course. And then Chris Sherburne was right there, but he's fighting for something else. He's fighting for the top 20 just to stay in the series. And then Mike Conti also trying to get to the Final Four.
And that was a big run for Chris, obviously, up until that point, because he had a real good opportunity, I think, to make himself comfortable headed into the the last 2 weeks of the year. Obviously now he's in a position where it's not kind of razor thin, but he's not close to a mathematical lock. He could mathematically lock top 20 after Texas next Tuesday, but it was impressive for him, and that's why I thought, and we discussed this, if for those listening in that watch the broadcast as well, for Conti is, Leahy doesn't need to win that race in the moment, right? Leahy doesn't need to win to advance because he's going to be good on points. Ottinger likely doesn't need to because he's going to be awfully close on points. There can only be one driver in on points, minimum if we have 3 different race winners. But I'm thinking those guys are fine. I thought Conti had to make a big swing for the strategy because, of course, he needed that must-win basically because of the awful way that the Roval ended for him. So that's why I thought we were going to see Conti kind of go crazy on the second cycle of pit stops, but that didn't really happen. That wasn't in the cards.
Yeah, and it was super tight for that top 20 battle to stay in the top 20. Of course, we had the live points as they run, and there were a bunch of them right there at the 20 mark, going up and down below it and above it. So that was interesting. The running order at lap 71 was Leahy, Ottinger, Conti, Sherburne, Busa, Keister, Mullis, Guest, Zielinski, Davies, Lowe, Alfala. Just past halfway, though, Keegan Leahy still in control.
And he was pulling, right? So, of course, the benefit to pitting later is you give up time right after the first pit cycle, but you'll be better at the end. Our concern was, would that tire benefit even be enough to get Leahy back to the lead? It was then and then some more. So what we thought was kind of an iffy call ended up being a great call, at the time, because I mentioned that on the long run, Leahy wasn't the best car in the first run of the race. So by having 8 or so fresher lap tires, I don't remember exactly what the interval was, but that gave him a little bit more on the long run when he was, lacking that first time through. So he actually went from being, bumper to bumper to bumper for those top 3 to pulling towards the end of that second run. And at that point, then you're kind of thinking, all right, well, now it's Keegan's race to lose. Whereas before, I think it could have gone to any of those 3 guys because they all looked pretty even. But Leahy struggled on the long run, and by staying out, actually, it did stand to benefit him at that point.
Yeah, and the tracks rubbered in a bit, and that might have helped him as well. 43 to go, stops start again. It's Leahy, Conti, then Ottinger stays out. The stops continue. Actually, Brandon Cantell had a moment where he missed pit road, but it stayed green. And then you guys did the iRacing full throttle with about 30 to go, and that's always fun.
Yeah, you guys will not believe how much time we went into coming up with full throttle, but I know that everybody likes doing that because that's one of the parts where we get, everybody involved in the broadcast. Like all the different cameras are being cut to back and forth, and the one thing that we don't have as much on the sim broadcasts is kind of that ambient sound. The way that these races get called is kind of more so radio style. And that's because not that you don't hear the cars under us, but it's just not the same. as you get kind of natural ambient sound of the cars and the crowd, and that you just don't have that in the sim world. So that's kind of our opportunity to get some of that immersion in, and I guess gets iRacing's money worth for all the time that they put in to get that camera shake, because they're putting our little full throttle cameras in the track, so those things are shaking. So that's a fun way to utilize one of the newer features.
Yeah, and I think it draws in NASCAR fans. They're used to seeing that, and it's exciting to watch for sure. After that, it was just kind of crazy. We noticed that 22 to go, Ryan Luza was making some gain through some of the pit cycles and getting closer to the front anyway. But at 15 to go, we noticed Ottinger was actually starting to hunt down Leahy, and then we were thinking, oh boy, we got a race.
Yeah, at like 20 to go, I didn't think it was going to happen. And then, we started following this battle, and it gets down to, 8/10, and then down to, closer and closer. And I think if that race goes green, I think Nick Ottinger wins the race. We mentioned Leahy wasn't good on the very long run. I think that Nick knew that. And we kind of saw that in the first run as well, where he had fallen off initially and then kind of closed back in to that point where they were all kind of stacked up before the first cycle of pit stop. So I think he did the same thing. He knew Leahy wasn't great long run. He saved a little bit and closed him in. And I think at that point, it looked like it was going to be Nick Ottinger's race if it had stayed green. I know Keegan wasn't going to make it easy, but I think it would have been a little bit more difficult to pull the Joey Logano and hold him off, because I think Ottinger had that thing.
Yep, and then Conti just floating in third. But the fun race to watch at this point was 9th through 13th. We had Lowe, Alfala, Luza, Zielinski all lined up, running each other pretty hard for 9th place.
Yeah, I thought if there was going to be trouble, it was going to come from there, because that was really the only group of cars that hadn't kind of split apart. And, you talk about guys like Luza, who had to work really hard to get an okay spot. I mean, it has not been a playoffs of note for Ryan Luza, which, he's disappointed in. And, after he had those 3 in a row, and we were talking about series history for tying the most wins consecutively and maybe an opportunity to break it, he just hasn't been spectacular, which is funny when you consider the fact that, I think he's at least in a position now where those kind of quiet, non-flashy runs have him +8 to the cut line. If I didn't have the stats and I hadn't looked, and you had told me, to guess where Luz is, I would have guessed 5th or 6th. He hasn't been flashy, and we expect drivers to need to be great, and he's just, I think, taken advantage of some of the drivers having some problems, but just mainly stayed out of trouble, which kind of came in the focus late in this one.
Yeah, 9 to go. McCullum spins but saves it, stays green, and then all of a sudden, our battle for the lead, Ottinger, he realizes, I think he's short on fuel, and he's like saving fuel like crazy and backing up big time. Guess they didn't get it completely filled up when he did stop, so Conti moves into second, and then boom, huge break for Ottinger. Caution when Cattell spins on the back after he has issues with Justin Bolton. Everyone pits, but 3 stay out.
Yeah, that was quite a roller coaster for Nick, right? Because we go from, if this race stays green, he's going to win it, to they didn't pack it full of fuel. And it was well short of a fuel run. So the gamble, right, was to save them half a second in the pit stop. And it could have cost them the race. So if we go green, I don't think he makes it to the end. He's probably, getting an awful result. And he's probably a bubble driver below the cut line into the next week. So it looked like it was going to be great for him. He drops back, and then you're right, we get the yellow because 2 cars back in 28th or so wreck, and both had, Cattell claimed responsibility for that one, and he apologized. Obviously felt bad about how that went down. And then we had the 3 cars who stayed out, which, it's kind of an iRacing trope, right? There's always somebody on old tires who stays out and kind of stacks everybody up, and I thought that the best chance for one of those cars to win was for it to happen on that very first restart when those guys with fresh tires, they were still a little bit cold. I think you got to get them on the first green-white checkered attempt. But we almost had to go through all our green-white checkered attempts, because that's when that 5-6 wide that I had mentioned earlier, the Pocono front straightaway kind of stuff, broke out at Kansas.
Yeah, so up front for this restart, it was Michael, Garigula, Diaz, and then Tehan, and they were the 3 who stayed out. Then it was Leahy, Conti, Sherburne, Ottinger, Keister, Guest, Clampett. 2 to go on the restart, and then a quick caution. It was Bob Bryant involved. It was 3 wide gone wrong around about 20th place. Several cars involved. Corey Vincent seemed to be the cause. Now, one thing you guys were doing, Evan, is immediately getting these guys on camera, on the radio. Hey, what happened from your perspective in the wreck?
And Steve joked that they're a lot polite, or more polite or nicer than the real guys were, but we could tell that some of them were pretty pissed off, right? Of course, the big thing that happens with, because that was technically our first red white checker, but it wasn't in overtime, right? So that was still in regulation, and I think at that point we kind of realized that maybe we're going to be here for a bit, right? Because then you're starting to push on fuel. So some of the guys who had stayed out, like, do they have enough fuel? And honestly, I thought Michael Grillia is going to win this race. He looked really good on the restart, and I thought he had a really good opportunity to do it. Obviously, Keegan Leahy, with the highest running driver with the fresh tires, was in a really good spot. And then technical green-white checker number 1, but attempt number 2 per se at the finish happened.
Yeah, so green-white checker number 1, it was the top 3 got lined up pretty quick, the ones without tires. And then it was caution, Leahy into the wall, completely destroyed. It looked like, for me, he turned down onto Ottinger. There was a lot of shuffling going about right there. It was a tough break after leading 85 laps. And he felt like, in the after interviews, he was like, man, I was going to win it.
Oh yeah, and I think Conti, who was on the bottom for that restart, was going to be stuck. I don't think he was going to be able to get to the inside of Grillia and Diaz, and Leahy just had to either go to a third lane to get above Tien, or just to kind of force his way through. And yeah, I mean, he's in the catbird seat. And again, Leahy doesn't even need to win this race to move on. He just needs to basically hold the top 5, top 10. Best car on the night, and he gets involved in an accident, and all of a sudden, I mean, in the blink of an eye, our entire championship picture has been flipped on its head, and we're not even done with this race yet.
Yeah, and what I was thinking, it's classic NASCAR style. I mean, NASCAR, it seems like these storylines kind of come to fruition throughout a race, especially in the playoffs, and we have a lot of those with Nick running out of gas, and then the caution, and now Keegan destroyed, and he ends up, I think, 32nd. Green-white checker number 2, Ottinger gets to 2nd on the bottom. He goes high on Mike Garigula to go around him. Conti follows through but gets shuffled high, and then maybe it's even 6 wide, and then a huge wreck. But they did get the white, so Nick Ottinger wins.
And Nick, I think he's been slept on so much this year, despite the fact that, he's got multiple race wins and is now locked into the championship 4. And I don't know why, because I think a lot of people talk about, Zelensky, even though, he did get the win on the super speedway, but he's kind of known as the road guy. And, obviously his ability to get the job done when it matters has been big. We talked about Luza's woes. We've talked about, Ray being back in, Conti being back in, because those guys are the past champions. I mean, Nick Ottinger, a guy who's been around this series for so long, I think if Leahy doesn't, move through, he could be my favorite. Jimmy Mullis. I mean, there's been a lot of drivers who have had stories because they've had ups and downs. Ottinger has been so consistent, and he has turned it up to the next level in these playoffs. I think people have been sleeping on him, and I think he's used that as motivation, because he has stormed in and taken a spot in the championship 4, looking, for a long-awaited championship.
Yeah, he's looking really good for sure. But let's talk about the heartbreak of Mike Conti. I mean, he was right there. He got hit from behind, and it just shuffled him up, and his race was done at that point. But, man, he was so close, too.
Yeah, he was. Nick was the first driver to get through. He kind of split that gap to go low to high, and Conti basically tried to do the same thing, and he wasn't clear. And I think Conti moved up, tapped Jarl a little bit, which loosened him up, and that's when everybody lost their mind, and they were 5-6 wide or whatever into the corner. And at that point, when they're 4 wide, I mean, Conti doesn't care. He needed the win. The second he moved up and got loose when he got into Tien, it was done. Finishing 5th wouldn't have felt any better than finishing 35th. He needed the win. That's why he went for that gap that wasn't necessarily there. And if he moves up and doesn't get into Jarl, I don't think it makes a difference. I think the key was being that first car to get up and kind of pull out a line on Guerrilla, and once Ottinger did it, that was it. I think the only thing that could have helped Conti at that point was if they wrecked before the line to get us another restart attempt, because that would have put him probably second or third, depending on where he would have been in relation to the 15. But I think that's why Conti made a move that basically, I'm not going to say he caused the wreck, but it kind of kicked off all the, guys diving high and low, and that's because he needed a win, and he knew that. So it's going to be same objective for him going into Texas, is he's going to need a win, and sometimes it means you got to make the uncomfortable move, per se.
And then a big high five for Mike Garigula for staying out and just taking a gamble and on the win. And if things could have went a little bit differently, he could have won it easily. So it was a great opportunity for him, and he made the best of it. I think he finished fifth. So the running order was Ottinger, Clampett. He snuck into second. Zielinski, where'd he come from? Third. Luza fourth. He was running back in the back for quite a bit early in the race, but he comes home fourth. Then Mike G, and then Mullis, Alfala. He gets a nice run. Lowe, Lyon, and Ray.
Yeah, just to the point on Guerrilla, I thought he was going to win it too. We were pulling up stats, so if he won it, I knew how many career starts it had taken, and you always want to see a guy get a first career win. So I think it's coming. And honestly, I joke about it, that being the iRacing trope of somebody staying out like that. But he had a really good look. It ended up being a really good call. He gains a lot of spots to get that top 5. So I think that's coming. You talk about the playoff guys. Leahy's in a tough spot now because he's 19 points, I think, below the cut. Garrett Lowe's 8 below the cut. Alfala's 21, which are drivers who are technically in the points bubble. But Conti down 43 needs to win. And on the flip side, of course, Bobby's locked in, Nick is locked in, and then we got Jimmy plus 12 and Luza plus 8. If I'm those guys, I'm sweating because I don't need to get Keegan Leahy'd. Take the, with those intervals, if you're P10, take the P10. Take the P11 if the guy in 11th is on you, right? Just don't wreck it out. Make them go out and win the race. Garrett Lowe could win the race 5th in points, and then it would bump Luza down. So not to say that you don't have to race for the win, because that's been Steve's thing, is I think you have to treat every race as a must-win. But after what happened to Keegan, it doesn't matter how good you are. It only matters where you finish. So curious how those drivers are going to try to play with the points at Texas. We saw a lot of that kind of strategizing when we went to the regular season finale a little bit earlier this year from Dega. Kind of similar storylines to what you saw in the Cup Series at Daytona. But I wonder if someone's gonna make a mistake. Does one of those guys drop out? Do we see another first-time winner? Because if somebody from below, gets a win, Lowe, Leahy, Alfala, whatever, then Luza and Mullis would be fighting for the last spot, and they'd only be 4 points apart, right? So something tells me we're going to get a lot of use out of our live points tracker next Tuesday.
Oh yeah, for sure. I could see, Leahy, he has enough points to get in and running where he's at 10th or 15th, so he stays out of that front pack at the end of the race, to try to avoid one. And
not this year, but Ryan Luza won at Texas 2 years consecutively in 2018 and 2019. So even though he's a guy that's above and doesn't necessarily need to win, he's the guy that has a lot of great history here. But you've also got Ray Alfala, a 2-time Texas winner. Nick Ottinger, who's already locked in with a win, a Texas winner from back in 2013 when he had one of his best statistical seasons of his career and of series history, where he won, 7 races or 6 races or whatever the number was. So there's a lot of those playoff 8 that have found victory lane at Texas. Granted, this is not the Texas of 2013, right? Obviously, New Texas is very different. So I'm not sure how reliable looking back on past stats is going to be. I think you kind of got to go into it just thinking it's a totally different racetrack.
Yeah, I'm thinking Leahy's a favorite going into next week for the win. But, Luza, he's from Texas. So, and like you said, he's won it before several times. So it'll be one of those two as my guest. Hey, Evan Pasoko, thank you for so much for coming on, talking Coke racing. We're really looking forward to this playoff. It's been fun.
Yep, happy to have you guys invite me on every week and to be able to talk about Coke Series racing. We hope that everybody's enjoying the action at home, and Texas is going to be fun. Whether your driver ends up above or below, or if you're just kind of rooting on the side of chaos, it's going to be a wild end to the round of 8, and hope everybody tunes in with us.
All right, we'll do. All right, let's get into topics. They're sponsored by Schoolyard Setups. Struggling to crawl into the top 10 in Road to Pro, always in the back of the Xfinity. Can't find that extra tenth to compete for wins in the NASCAR iRacing Series? Visit schoolyardsetups.com and get ready setups for A, B, and C each week. Enter referral code 207124 when you sign up so they know you heard it from iRacers Lounge. Don't get bullied around the track again. Get your setups at schoolyardsetups.com.
Also, Mike, before we get into topics here, just inviting, we do have Roger Craig joining us for the podcast tonight too, to maybe give some insight on some stuff, and then he's going to share a topic with us later.
All right, welcome, Roger.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I guess the old famous first-time caller, long-time listener. I've been listening to the podcast for a couple of years now, and it's been invaluable for me, I'll tell you.
All right, awesome.
All right, I'll take the first topic, and also welcome Roger. We have a Virtual Victory Lap voting starting now. We got a tweet from the NTT IndyCar Series, and they're taking nominations, or actually, it looks like they already have the vote on the nominations. This is a vote on, I guess, the wildest iRacing moment, and it's specifically for this from the series, and the most popular tweet by a tight margin of about 7% is with Daly at Watson's Glen, and he basically has a car flying over part of the field as they're coming over the hill.
Yeah, pretty cool looking replay, and where the car's flipping everywhere, and he kind of drives under it. But the way he laughs about it as he drives away from the wreck was kind of funny.
It's funny how they do as much as they can with the physics, but you get sometimes when the cars get in the air, it's funny and unrealistic, but pretty cartoonish and entertaining at the same time. You can have a car land on you, but if you get lucky with the netcode, take no damage.
I think it's cool that this is a tweet that IndyCar put out. So IndyCar is, and then what they did is they put a short video clip of each of the 4 things that you can vote on. They twittered out of the video clip 4 different times, and so it was kind of fun just to watch each one of them and then go up and vote. And it was kind of a neat little activity. Looks like they had 1,423 votes.
All right, guys, that takes us to our next story. And this is really just kind of a reminder from last week. We did a story about a benefit race for a little guy from Australia, and they get to New York to the Memorial Sloan Kettering Center, and he's suffering from neuroblastoma. And so we talked about the charity race, and we're just going to give you guys a reminder that race will be held on Sunday, November 1st. So that's for Nixon. And just a reminder to sign up for that race. And also, if you can't make that race, you can always go to their GoFundMe page, which is available to make donations directly to help out Nixon. We got a message in the forums from and thanking us basically for mentioning the race last week. So sign up, guys, and get your donations in. It goes to a great cause.
Yeah, and he threw up the GoFundMe link, and so if you go to GoFundMe and search Nixon's Hope for a Cure, you'll find it. And I was kind of blown away. He's actually raised $318,000 of the $350,000 goal. So relatively speaking, they're really close to reaching the goal.
that's a crazy goal to have, but those operations and then those medicines and stuff, they're so expensive. He's gonna their money is gonna go to a great cause, but sometimes it just doesn't seem like enough. And I don't know what the healthcare system down in Australia is like, but
Well,
it's really expensive.
the reason they're coming here is because the treatment is just
Oh
not
yeah, that's right. Sorry,
allowed there.
that's right. They're coming to New York, so that would be completely out of their own pocket then, right? You guys.
Yeah, you
wouldn't-
don't have an insurance company who's going to pay for that, right?
Yeah, that's unfortunate. That I mean, obviously it's an experimental thing. I remember from last week, but yeah, it's pretty. That's not going to be a cheap thing to go through. So I'm glad that they've gotten close to their goal.
All right, we'll keep rooting for Nixon to get to New York. Let's talk a bunch of Tyler Hudson tidbits on the forum, Greg.
Well, the first thing that came up, Tyler Hudson, he was going on about a post about the Pro Truck Series, and I guess the participation levels between the two of them don't really match up, and he was trying to find out why it might be happening, because he's finding out that 1,437 drivers are participating in the Pro 4, but only 271 are in the Pro 2 series. And he just wanted to know if maybe either dropping a series for the license or doing something different that would help it out. And he was asking the page, and there was some some people were talking about some different things that you can do in here to change it. But I don't know. What would you guys think the difference is between the two?
Well, the Pro 2 is a much harder truck to drive than the Pro 4, for sure. It just won't turn, and for me anyway. And I would gravitate towards the Pro 4 any day over the Pro 2. So I think that's really the answer. And so this was a neat thread to read because there's several pages of good ideas back and forth about how can we make this a better series. They're talking about tweaking maybe the power structure of the truck and stuff like that.
It's kind of good that they are trying to get it even between the two series. Like, obviously, no one wants to participate only with 271 drivers participating in it, right? Like, it's hard to find your time of the week to drive. It must be only like 1 or 2 times a week you can get in the truck and race.
What I love is that there's somebody whose job is to look at this and figure it out and make it better. You know, because all of us as racers, you know, we just show up and, oh, there's nobody here, so I guess I'm not going to run it, you know. And we don't do anything about it. But Tyler's taking it on. He's like, yeah, let's figure this out. Let's see how we can get some more people involved. Is it a timing thing? Do they overlap with other races? Is it fixed versus open? You know, all those questions. And then Tony, they talked about maybe raising the max amount of starters.
Yeah, and well, this one I found a little interesting because I had no idea what the number is when they start making splits. I don't know about that for any of the series, let alone the trucks. But I'd learned that the trucks is currently at 12, and Tyler Hudson put up on the forums just asking for some input about, you know, moving it up to 16. And you know, one of the replies was quite positive that, yeah, obviously they would like that. But the person that replied said that they wanted to be able to, you know, race with more trucks. Now, I don't run these series very often, if at all, but I always thought the truck series had good participation, but maybe not so much.
Yeah, I think it was positive in the forum thread, everybody going to 16 versus 12. And for me, I'm always like, let's have more, the more vehicles, the better. And that's kind of why I like NIS, because you're going to have 33 to 37 cars when in A, A Open or A Fix, you don't have that many. And I think it makes a difference in how the race plays out, having that extra 10 cars in the race.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I just like the fact that now that I know what the number is, for the splits, I should probably go look up if I can to see where the other series that I'll run randomly, where they split at.
I don't think that's something you can look up, though. It'd be nice if they published that, though.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, Tyler Hudson seems to be on a bit of a tear, just trying to get try to change things for the good, see what people want. Love that about iRacing, that they ask us.
Yep. He also gave us an update on the Crandon Land Rush, where they all line up to get on a straight line and start the race. He said there's no update yet. It's turned out to be quite a project, he said.
Which is kind of interesting if they were obviously planning it, and all of a sudden now it's like they planned to have it as a release, and then all of a sudden now it's kind of just taking a lot longer. It's something they obviously missed when they were creating it.
I'd have to know more about what's going on behind the scenes as far as building the software for it to know what's making it harder to do than they expected.
Well, what was the original problem that the reason they took it out? Was it just was glitching?
I don't even remember, but I was thinking it's a grid, right? Everybody, normally we're lined up in a grid. We're all in a line, but in this case, they're all in the same position, so to speak, right? So maybe it's a different kind of programming.
It starts like a motocross race, basically. It's not actually on the track. It's actually looks like it's like on the grass, on the infield or something like that they start from. Maybe that has something to do with it.
Where it's off the racing surface, right?
Correct, yeah.
And I mean, you can have standing racing starts on the track, but there may be something with it being off the track surface, whether it's causing them to get an X or something. I don't know. Maybe they'll have more details about it. It's one of those things that's kind of slipped from our mind.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, I don't have Crandon, so I don't know for sure, but I think they're doing a rolling start, more like like a stock car start, instead of where they.
That's what they're doing now. Yeah.
Yeah, instead of gridding up like the trucks do in the other races.
So what they're saying is it's going to be very hard to put drag racing in iRacing.
Well, that's a whole different world. But speaking of a world we're familiar with, when it comes to drafting, Greg, do you even lift, bro?
Am I supposed to lift?
Well, that's the question Michael Sparks was asking. He posted the question in track or in draft track racing. Do you prefer to toggle the throttle or modulate the throttle, or scrub the brake to keep from hitting the cars in front of you when you don't want to?
See, this question's changed over the last 2 years too, right? The answer to this, because when you were restrictor plate racing, you didn't want to be out of the throttle, but now that there's spacer, there's the tapered spacer, it's not as big of a deal.
I always preferred to be a little bit out of the throttle because it was easier to control and it saved gas. Now I can't speak in the real world. I remember when they were doing the tandem drafting thing, that they had to stay on the throttle just so that the cooling system would stay full throttle. If they got off the gas, they'd actually blow the engine.
For me, it's all about if you need to save gas or not. If gas isn't an issue, I'm going to hold down the throttle and drag the brake if needed. But if it's early in the race and we're not on the last pit stop or past the last pit stop, I'm definitely not doing that. I'm lifting the throttle, trying to save fuel.
Yeah, a couple people mentioned what you said, Mike, to keep RPMs up higher, making the brake instead of lifting it and getting back on it. But I was actually responded in that thread was Keegan Leahy, and he said he lifts. He does not drag the brake and when he's drafting, and he's been pretty successful in restrictor plate races, he won the Daytona for the Coke Series.
Yep. I like doing the drag the brake, especially on restarts. Like as we're coming up to the restart, what I'll do is I'll hold down both throttle and brake at the same time. And so the revs are up. I'm holding the brake so I don't run into the guy in front of me. And then when the green goes, I just let go of the brake. My throttle's already down. And it works. It'll give you an advantage over the guy next to you.
I actually just started doing that, Mike, since you started talking about that a couple weeks ago, and I've noticed a huge improvement on my restarts.
Yeah, it works.
Well, you're basically, the motor's revving itself up and you're just taking the brake off, and it's kind of just like launching it forward. You're not, that split second where your brain says accelerate, you're not missing that spot to push the pedal down, right? So that's what you're seeing as the difference, right?
Well, the RPMs are up even though I'm holding the brake. They're
Yeah,
up,
that too,
not
yeah.
where they would normally, but they're up over where you wouldn't be. And that's the key difference. Like you said, you don't have to think about it. You just let go of the brake, and the revs are already there.
And you're putting it in a better part of the power band, basically. Every engine has different parts of the RPM where it can get more torque.
So, Connor Rockwood, he was contemplating the amount of his iRacing content he has. Just kind of like considering all the tracks and cars he had, and he kind of counted it up and figured it got a number. And he thought he'd put a post on the forums asking everybody and taking a survey about how much content do you guys own, and that includes free and legacy content. So if you add up all your cars, all the cars that you bought and were free, and all the tracks that you bought for free, what's the number come to? So I did that myself. I counted up I own 48 cars and I have 79 tracks, and so I put that in his survey that he did there, and looks like I'm a little bit lower than the top level, but I'm like in the 10% range at between 130 and 150. So yeah. So how about you guys? How much content do you guys own?
It looks like I'm about in the same place with just a few more cars and one less track.
Now, how do you add these up easily, or is there a place you can look up this in the new UI, perhaps?
No, I had to count it. I just went to the old website and went my cars and my tracks and went 1, 2, 3, 4, etc.
Oh.
Now, did you count the Pro Trucks as 2? Or like anything? Well, no, I guess I didn't really.
That's a good point. That's one purchase, but you get 2 vehicles.
I just counted each icon,
box?
each picture I saw. Yeah, each box.
Now,
That's
do
what
you
I
get?
did. I went with my cars and just scrolled down, counting them.
I don't have enough fingers and toes. Do you have? Do you get more of a percentage like after the 40%?
No.
I've hit that.
I'm surprised at how many people
Whatever
are at
that
the top
means.
level. It's 24% voted at the top level of 170 or more.
I'm in like the high 60s for cars.
Well, it will come down to how many different aspects of the service you want to run. I run the sports cars and all the stock cars, though I haven't been running the short tracks in a long time, any of the short track series for years, or I probably might have a few more of those. There are some people who can run all 4. The majors has made me buy a few tracks that I probably wouldn't have had before in cars, but it just depends on how many different services you run. If somebody is road only, their count's going to be a little bit lower.
And only 3% voted that they'd have the free stuff only, where they haven't bought any content. 3%.
I think I'm pretty much almost all I'm only missing probably 10 or 15, maybe 10 cars and less than 10 tracks.
I mean, if you're starting on iRacing and you're brand new, Are you okay just running the free stuff and not buying a single car track for a while?
You were now compared to what 5 or 6 years ago when you had to buy a lot of stuff, but now you got a lot of stuff to start with.
That's true. Because when I started, we didn't have dirt, and all that, and they've made a lot of stuff free content here recently. Some of the older cars and tracks.
I think most of the rookie series is all free tracks, right?
I think so. I think they do it that way on purpose.
So did we already cover the this next article, Greg, or is this a different charity race?
So this is for Brian. Roger. We're gonna bring Roger in here.
Yeah, this is a different one.
Go over his Triple Crown Charity Week, and Roger, do you want to fill us in on why we've had you come on as a guest today, and what your event is here?
Yeah, for sure, Greg. I just want to thank you guys for letting me come on. And G-Force Racing League next week, we shut down our regular racing, and it'll be the Epsilon Sprint Wraps Triple Crown Charity Week. So, as mentioned earlier, this is a benefit for 5-year-old Lennox Mobley. He was severely burned in a freak pit accident in Port Royal earlier in September. Airlifted out. And he had some severe burns. So a great cause. We're working through the Steve King Foundation. So Steve King was a sprint car driver, and our league is a dirt league. Steve King was a sprint car driver who lost his life at the Knoxville National years ago. And from that, his family started Steve King Foundation. They've helped drivers, I think, in 34 states, Canada, Australia, families that are struggling, the effects of injuries, etc. So it runs from October 27th to November 2nd. We have 3 divisions. There will be a 360 division, which will be open setup, and then street stock and pro late model fixed divisions. 12 races in total, all broadcast. And it's $10 per